getting my game set up here. Almost done. My name is Jason Rohrer, and I'm an independent game developer. I have sort of a very different take on games from what the mainstream industry is doing, what all this stuff around here is doing, all of the sort of glamorous, high-polished 3D graphics and visual splendor and all that kind of thing. I'm really focusing on games that, at the core, are about interactivity.
My training is in physics, but then somehow I got involved in games, and I worked for Atari for some years, and then Atari collapsed, and I became a freelance designer, and I did a bunch of games then. When I was at Atari, I realized that games had a fundamental flaw, and that is that they were about things rather than people.
Let me tell you about my dream. I dreamed of the day when computer games would be a viable medium of artistic expression, an art form. I dreamed of computer games encompassing the broad range of human experience and emotion.
17 years ago, I decided, if this is going to happen, I'm going to have to do it myself. And so I figured, you know, I'm smart. It might take me, 2 years, maybe 3. Well, that was 17 years ago. So, but we just actually launched yesterday.
Come, dragon, I will fight you. Sancho Panza, my sword. Charge! Charge!
He founded this conference 20 or 25 years ago, but after he's left, he's been very critical of the whole enterprise of the game industry and so on, and very critical of this event, and even very critical of the Independent Game Festival and the kinds of games that are on display here.
I really want to learn about his use of spatial metaphor. It's an interesting inversion. The problem with artistic expression in games is that the games are fundamentally spatial, and the means of expression available to the player are very limited.
Well, the one thing I'm really nervous about is actually showing Chris some of my games, because, you know, as I got my start as a game developer, I was reading his books, and he was sort of this game design hero, almost like a teacher at a distance for me. And so now it almost feels like I'm preparing for the oral exam finally after all these years. I'm meeting you.
Jeez.
I'm Jason.
What's the weather like up there?
It's a little bit colder, a little less oxygen.
I'm very pleased to meet you.
Yes,
Jason.
yes. Fortunately, there's not very many games here to look at, but I do have mine set up.
Yeah, let's look at it.
Which is the weird two-player game about consciousness and isolation.
Yeah, that's the one I couldn't look at earlier. So.
Right, it requires 2 players, and we're not supposed to look at each other's screens.
Yeah.
And our interaction with each other is very indirect.
Okay.
So we can touch any key to begin, and then if you hit the space bar, you can create blocks and add them to the world.
Okay.
And then if you walk around a little bit to the far left and far right, there's some other things that are explained, 2 other actions that you can do.
I love the retro graphics. It's so...
There's a whole school of us kind of doing this kind of stuff now. I guess part of it is to take the focus off of the graphics and to make people say, well, I'm not here for the visual spectacle.
Yeah.
What am I here for? I'm here to think about what I'm doing and why the designer created this particular set of interactions and what they might mean, you know. And there's those little keyboard hints about 2 other actions you can take. Sleeping and waking up.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So there's a bit of confusion in this game about which of these things is actually the real world. We don't really know.
Oh, okay.
I like the idea of a rule book that just explains everything, and then the expression is in the emergence.
There is...
I mean, because your games used to have these big, thick rule books, right?
Yes, yes.
Or explanations of how to play.
Yeah.
You don't sit down to balance a power and just play.
Yeah, yeah. And in fact, that's one of the killer problems. In the old days, we were so limited that there really was a choice, a simple trade-off between, if you want richness, you got to have a big manual.
Right.
And if you want to have a small manual, you got to keep it simple. And that's one of the things that's really interesting about your stuff, is that you got the richness without the manual.
It's a very sort of narrow channel that I'm exploring, right? It doesn't have all sorts of, it doesn't have the sort of complexity and multifaceted. It's like one facet. Like Passage, for example, explores essentially one idea, which is one little nuanced feeling of coming face to face with your own mortality. Passage is also a game about realizations. And the realization, it seems obvious. Oh, there's the spouse. I wonder what she does. Oh, it's pretty. I picked up this heart. You know, this heart blooms around you, and wasn't that lovely? But then you have this realization about what the trade-off was. Oh, I can't get down in the maze anymore quite as easily.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to just put that in the manual.
What is, I think, most important about your approach is that you're taking the idea of spatial navigation, which has always been done too damned literally.
Right.
And suddenly turning it into metaphor.
Right.
And then exploring, well, what kind of metaphors can be created with spatial systems. How far do you think it can be pushed?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest complaint about all these other games that are spatial, it's not necessarily that they're spatial, but that their goal is to simulate reality.
Yeah.
That's their bread and butter. And anything that doesn't fit into that, anything that breaks that illusion of reality is excluded from possible fodder for game design. Think of a game like Pac-Man as just an abstract example. This game is a game where you're running around in a maze, but you can still see everything in the maze, even though you're supposedly behind walls and so on. When you pick up a power pellet, or whatever you call it, I don't know what it's really called, where the ghost gets scared, all of the ghosts simultaneously realize that you've done this, even though they're way across the maze from you. Spooky action at a distance, it violates relativity, right?
Yeah.
But because it's so abstract and symbolic, we have no problem accepting that. We don't ever question why they know. They just know. It's a symbolic, iconic system. But when you get into simulating reality and try to make Pac-Man in 3D, you pick up this pellet and the ghosts are way over there, you can't even see them. How did they know I just ate this? And why are they scared? You have to have lightning bolts travel across to them or something.
So the question is there really enough expressiveness in moving around an image? Is there enough there for you to say interesting things with? I mean, it's like, suppose I gave you a language with only 50 words.
Right.
Could you really write good poetry with it?
I'm worried about it. I'm definitely worried about it. I made 9 or so games in the past year, and kind of exploring this idea as far as I could.
Yeah.
And I sort of feel like I may have hit the limitations. So this is Pixel Junkie, and this is a game I haven't ever played before.
You've heard nothing of it? Never played it?
I've heard of it, but I don't have a PlayStation 3.
Okay.
This is actually our home garden. And who we're these grimps. They're called grimps because they grip and they jump.
Okay.
And they move along the plants. They also have the ability to tether and swing.
So they're almost like little insects.
Very much so. But if you look kind of close, you can actually see they have like a wristwatch and
a
little backpack and
Cute
stuff.
little characters.
Yeah. There's a lot of concept out there about saying, two-dimension really doesn't belong on a high-def system. All of the games in the first series of Pixel Junk are set out to prove that two-dimensional games can be great in high definition.
Right. Well, we all know that 3D is just a fad. No, I totally believe that. I'm not joking. You want to look around here more, or do you want to go off to the next?
Let's go off. Actually, I'd like to discuss that.
Oh, Pixel Junk Eden. Yes,
Yeah,
let's discuss Pixel
yeah.
Junk Eden.
So,
Should discuss before we leave the show floor is that this is your baby here.
it's very different. I
Than what started in your living room?
Yes, yes. What I started was collegial.
And this is, I guess this aspect is sort of an industry.
This is commercial.
To do an expo.
Yeah. This is what the industry is now, and this is what the show should be.
You look at the talks, and it's all about, you know, oh, here's how I got my business off the ground. Here's how I got my particle effects for my rain to look just right.
The best I ever saw was something about two guys saying, giving a talk on the physics of how the female breast bounces, and so how to design the.
Right.
Whoa, whoop-de-doo.
But anyway, so Pixel Junk Eden is, you know, a prime example of the sort of thing I think that you talk about when you criticize the Independent Games Festival.
I didn't like it at all because it's just a variation on the same old hand-eye coordination.
We're into no man's land here.
You know, can you twiddle your fingers fast enough to make cute things happen on the screen? Well, okay, fine. It's a very good variation on that.
Right.
But so what? I mean,
right.
The basic genre of coming up with clever ways to twiddle the buttons.
Right.
That's been done a million times.
The reflex challenge. Pac-Man.
Yeah. I mean, Pac-Man did it pretty well. Now this is better, but
Why don't you? It's arguable whether it's better. They've completely removed the challenge. You know, what is there there? You're just essentially going through these motions because the game asks you to, and you bring 4 friends in and you all twiddle your thumbs for a while and make pretty things happen.
Yeah.
And you're not even engaging with the system the way Pac-Man asked you to.
Yeah.
Which is you become you reflect on what the machine is putting out and you hone your abilities. And maybe it's a very sort of superficial thing because it's just reflexes, but it changes you, at least a little bit. That game doesn't change you with its mechanical aspects.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. One of the things that as an old fart game designer that sets me apart is that I have seen everything under the sun. Very few things strike me as, whoa, that's new and different.
Right.
In fact, damn few. And I would say that, you know, looking at your work as an ensemble, I realize, whoa, there is something new and interesting here.
Right.
But, you know, The Sims, that wasn't a new idea. That was anticipated by something called Little Computer People, done by Activision.
Right.
Everything is derivative. And yeah, in an industry like this, we should be seeing an explosion of ideas. And we're not. I don't know.
I mean, I guess you're completely adverse to the idea of ever coming back and making a game ever again.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that.
in that, you know, interactive storytelling clearly is interactive computation, can kind of be lumped under a similar super banner.
Here's one way of expressing my personal strategy here. The way to be the biggest fish in the pond is not to be a bigger fish.
Right.
It's to find a smaller pond.
Well, you're the only fish in that pond.
Yeah.
You know, you were asking where we're going to move in New Mexico, whether it's going to be Albuquerque or more off the beaten path. And in fact, we don't have a car, so we are sort of stuck. We would like to live off the beaten path for the benefits that it brings, but then we can't get to the places that we need to go. So we always have to live in somewhat of an urban setting.
Yeah.
So we're moving to Las Cruces, which is a medium-sized college town.
Yeah.
With a good public transportation and. You know, you have a small yard around your house where you can do some gardening and so on.
Well, you're not going to do much water-heavy gardening.
Not water-heavy. So what do you think of, in terms of interactive storytelling efforts? There's your efforts. It's sort of in a similar related camp to what you're doing is what the people try to do with Facade.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you're aware of.
Oh, yeah.
But which is a total flop, I mean, in its own...
I wouldn't call it a flop.
Well, I mean, it's a great experiment. I loved playing it. I enjoyed it, and it was very funny.
Ian! Hey! God, it's been so long since we've seen you.
Hi, how are you? God, it's been a while. And I have to say, you look great. Make yourself at home. Come on in. Ian, seeing you again makes me remember the wonderful times we all used to have. Funny. Ian, for a second there, I thought you were flirting with me.
I like to think of it as the Wright brothers airplane of interactive storytelling.
Right, right. Like it's not going to fly you across the Atlantic.
Yeah, but it was
still...
the first one to get into the air.
Right.
And so they
and it certainly
deserve
got into the
credit
air.
for that.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi.
Wow.
So I guess you know more about this than I do. You can lead the way.
Let me tell you the story of why I got into games. I was part of the Vietnam generation. You know, we all felt very strongly that that war was wrong. All my friends were very anti-war, and I knew a lot of guys who were demonstrating and so forth, and I certainly sympathized with it, but I felt as if it wasn't enough. I mean, just getting mad about it didn't solve anything.
Right, right.
I decided I wanted to understand war in my very naive view that, well, you know, if we just figure this out, you know, maybe we can just make it all go away, you know.
That's why you started trying to design war games and so on?
Well, that came a little later, but the first approach was to study war itself, and I spent a lot of time studying, reading military history and trying to understand how it worked and why people did it, and then as part of that, I happened to stumble into war games. And those were fun.
These were, before you were doing them on computers, you were probably looking into
these were board games.
Yeah, right, the hex grids and so on.
Yep. These were very serious games.
Right.
You think my rule books were bad.
Well, I've heard legends.
Anyway, now wait, what did these do?
So what's that?
That's Alcatraz.
That's Alcatraz.
Yeah. In 1974, I ran into this guy at the computer center who was working on a program to do a game called Blitzkrieg, which was one of the classic board games.
Right, right.
I told him he was crazy. You know, it can't be done.
You were talking about because of the artificial intelligence issue?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So what happened? Did he do it?
He never got it working, but it got me to thinking, well, is it really impossible? And the more I thought about it, the more I decided, well, maybe it could be done.
Chris, you want to climb up here?
Yeah, let's have a look. Let's have a look.
Oh.
This thing, you see how he's got this rotating thing for turning it real fast?
Right, right.
So
you can track a plane that's moving.
Yeah, basically you got two guys.
One who's controlling the vertical.
Yeah,
oh, but this part's locked.
Oh, okay. What do they have here? Oh, they got filters. Oh, very nice. It could be that this was meant to be a multi-purpose gun. I mean, this is definitely anti-aircraft.
The games you were making on the mainframes were not ever going to be commercial products because who had a mainframe?
Yeah, yeah.
You were just doing it for yourself and to show people. And...
Yeah. In 1976, I got the first one running. I called it Tactics.
Oh, right. I've heard of this. Okay.
And I will never forget the sense of shock I had when the enemy tanks that I had programmed started shooting me up and destroying all of my tanks and then chasing me all the way across the board.
And this was, but you would enter your move into the computer, and then the computer would respond with its move, and you would move the tanks around on a board, a physical board.
Yeah. I had a couple of people ask me for the schematics.
The process of creating these games did help you in that way in some way?
Yeah, the culmination of all of this was Balance of Power.
Which was a peace game.
Yes, an unwar game.
Right.
And one of the points in Balance of Power was that you do need to use military force occasionally.
Right, right.
But if you do, you damn well better know exactly what you're doing and exactly what you intend to accomplish with it.
And it's interesting to me that that game was very well received.
It came out right when the Cold War was reaching its peak.
Should we try and go back out?
Yeah, yeah, and people were scared of nuclear war.
Right.
And
well, you know, the first time I ever heard reference to Balance of Power was I was reading the Weird Games Manifesto, and it was talking about how, you know, other art forms can put you into a strange frame of mind or an uncomfortable frame of mind, and he was talking about very few examples of games that do this, and he pointed out your game, Balance of Power, because when he played as the Russians, it was an asymmetrical game in the way that the world is laid out.
Yeah.
And that he understood for the first time, he was sort of put into the shoes of the Soviets and could understand where they were coming from.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's interesting to me that whatever audience was out there for video games or computer games at that time was ready and willing to consume something as complicated and demanding of the player as Balance of Power.
Remember, this was personal computers.
Right.
And back then, in 1985, the only people who owned personal computers were adults. I mean, kids didn't have these things.
Right.
The market wasn't dominated by children the way it is now. Some games here.
Beautiful electric game.
Okay, we're set.
So this is a game where you start off on an island. You have this little creature on the island. You start off on the island with three other creatures that are all doing the same thing as you. They're all in the same boat.
Yeah.
And some of them are moving around to the south. If you walk down there, you saw one of them poke its head up. But you can see what they're, keep going, and you'll see them down there.
Okay,
so,
there they are.
So they've defined a plot for themselves, and they're planting plants in their garden plot. And
okay.
And you can define a plot for yourself by clicking that button there. That's the square.
That.
Yeah.
Okay. So.
And then use the crosshairs to select and drag a region on the screen that's yours. You can make your region overlap with the regions of others if you want.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And that's where the conflict and compromise comes from, because you can only harvest from the plants that are in your area.
Yeah.
But you can drag your area around somebody else's area and say, hey, that's my plant too.
Oh, okay.
Every time you play the game, the plants look different, and the leaf shapes and the way the blooms. We can go look at some of the variety here of vegetation.
Oh, yes.
There's a third gardener over here. Where is he? Somewhere around here. He's maybe went off in a different direction. He's off by himself someplace. Oh, there he
is.
And he's busily planting. He's already harvested some seeds, and he has started some new plants as well. So I just stole fruit from that guy, and he expressed a little anger at me. So his opinion of me has changed.
Okay.
Because I'm a criminal. You know,
you're a thief.
You can take this action on somebody's plant where you go in and you destroy it. So I'm going to destroy his plant because I'm angry at him.
Okay.
And he just stole from my plant, so I'm a little mad at him too. But if I go and, let's say, I'll destroy his next plant too that he's trying to water there. So this was my first art game.
This is.
It's very complicated, and a lot of people
Yeah.
didn't understand it. But the people who did, there's this sort of choosing how many offspring to have, and the dynamics of that, and so on. And eventually, if too much fighting has happened, the island gets so destroyed that there's not even room to grow food anymore. So there's also this whole component where you're trying to eventually escape from the island by building this portal of transcendence, and that's the first layer of the portal. But this got rejected by the Independent Games Festival.
What?
As, I don't know, I guess they didn't think it was...
If you wanted them to accept it, really, what you should have done is put some thermonuclear weapons in there.
All right, so you want to show me... Let's do some Storytron stuff.
Oh, okay.
Actually, the one thing I haven't really seen much of, I've played Balance of Power 2K, or is that what it's called?
About 2K, yeah.
Yeah. I guess we can run through that a little bit, but I'm really interested in the authoring tool as well, because I haven't really gotten a chance to look at that.
Let's see, the basic structure here's where you list the verbs. And so there are lots and lots of verbs.
And you've arranged them into categories that seem dependent on the context of this game.
Yeah. And you can arrange,
But that's
set up
just
any
for
categories.
the author to look at.
Yeah. It doesn't affect the player.
This is a verb where you're asking another
Yeah.
country for advice. What are the characters in this game? Are they they're countries?
The characters are countries.
Okay.
But of course, the most important character is always fate.
Okay.
And that's fundamental to Storytron technology. Player number 0 is fate. And fate does more than all of the other characters combined.
And do you get to see the direct outcomes of fate? Like the direct, or is it kind of happening behind the scenes?
Express fate. Normally, fate is expressed indirectly. For example, perhaps I should show you. Well, you've already seen Storyteller, right?
I can see it again. I haven't seen it for a while. So.
Okay, so here's the start. It's September 11th. The Al-Qaeda terrorists have destroyed the World Trade Center, killed 3,000 Americans. What do you want to do? So let's set a policy goal.
Okay.
The obvious goal is, let's go get Osama bin Laden.
Guns a-blazing.
Yeah. So
and that's the execute button there.
Yeah, that says, okay, that's the sentence I want. Because if you want, you can change it.
Right. And,
you can go back and pick something else. But
let's do that.
This means, okay, do it. And now, this is fate, only it says your advisors present a background briefing about Afghanistan, and then you've got a whole bunch of policy options. For example, we can go and ask very nicely, would you please hand over? And he comes back and says, no.
Okay.
So now
this is the country's face there.
Yeah, that's him talking back to you.
Okay, so let's launch airstrikes.
Yeah, it's the American thing to do.
So Balance of Power obviously is the big public demo.
Yep.
You launched off on this with the idea of dreaming big and so on, and obviously it is a very big, ambitious, audacious dream. Do you ever question it? Do you ever wonder if it's actually going to work in the end? And it's very complicated.
Yeah.
Almost Baroque.
I'll tell you, the problem with this is I have invested my entire life into this. I mean, we've bet the farm on it, literally. If this fails commercially, we will be financially ruined.
You mean you and your spouse?
Yep. And it's not something that I can permit to fail. If this fails, my life is a failure. And that's really scary.
Right.
Especially because right now it's very close. This thing could just be a complete disaster. So, how about some dinner?
Yes, let's go get some dinner.
I'm getting hungry.
back in 1992, you were sort of seeing where it was going and complaining about it. And the fact that did it ever fulfill your vision, your negative dystopian vision, or whatever you want to call it, of what you were envisioning back then. You were complaining about the focus on graphics and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, I am not going to sit here and say that when Wolfenstein came out, I was not incredibly impressed and enthralled by it. I mean, I certainly was.
I played it too.
I mean, it certainly captured my imagination. When someone described it to me, even as you can think of it as a piece of concept art, there's this game, it's called Wolfenstein, where you look through your own eyes down these mazes, and you can actually turn your head smoothly and walk forward and backwards smoothly.
Yeah.
I said, no. This three-dimensional space was like blooming in front of my eyes, and I couldn't believe it. It looked so real.
Yep.
Like I was gonna fall into it.
Yeah.
You know, so I understand.
I felt much the same way. I mean, it was terribly impressive. And Doom was the one that really sealed it. Wolfenstein still had a very cartoony look.
Right.
Actually, I've long felt that what really made Doom go was not so much the graphics as the sound.
All right. So that's the interesting thing, is that, you know, even you were impressed by these kinds of things and so on, and so I mean, it did feel like this little kind of revolution or something.
Yeah,
it just seems like everything just piled on top of that, and we never looked back. You know, just this big sandwich of, you know, progress on that one little narrow branch.
For me, the thing I always hammer away at is it's the interaction. The entertainment lies in the interaction, not in the presentation. And
Right.
so you have to design it from the ground up so that the interaction is intrinsically entertaining.
Right.
And
I think there was some point you made in one of your books. I think you might have even been talking about Doom, where there's this sort of graphical sugar, like that you just sprinkled about, like when you shoot a monster, there's like a bloody thing on the floor afterward.
Yeah.
But that it has no gameplay effect. It's just like a decal.
Yep.
With nothing underneath it. And you made the point that, hey, if it's there and you see it, it should be there for an interactive reason. It's a non-interactive element. That's a mistake, because you walk over it and nothing happens.
Yeah.
You don't slip on it, you don't trip on it.
Yeah.
You said if it's going to be a pool of blood, you better be able to slip on it.
Yes, yes.
A lot of people sort of perceive you as this grumpy old guy who just hates the game industry. I think a lot of people, when I started telling people that Crawford was coming around the Game Developers Conference, and when I was telling some of my friends what I was going to be doing on Tuesday night, a lot of them were sort of like, ooh, what's he going to do?
He's bringing his gun.
I guess it doesn't seem to me like you're as grumpy about the game industry as I perceived you, or ahead of time was thinking that you were. Or...
I mean,
obviously it's going in a direction that lots of us disagree with. You know? I mean,
I think there are a couple of reasons why that perception exists. One, I am very dismissive of the pure techie approach to game design. I've said a lot of ferocious things about people who go in, all they want to do is just fuck around with a computer and make it do cute, clever things. And that is not game design. but there are a lot of people who have done that. They come up with some clever graphics trick and then say, how can we turn this into a game?
Right.
Game developers are very defensive about the sordid reputation that they have.
Why do you think they have that reputation?
There are several reasons. One reason is that games should form character and build your body and so forth. Or at least they should be mentally, like chess. That's a respectable game. And video games don't have any of those traits. So they're just fun and nothing else. And there is a puritanical streak in American culture that feels that fun without any redeeming value is sordid.
Right.
But there's actually, I think...
So good, clean fun is an oxymoron, right?
Clean fun has to have something that makes it clean.
Right. Not just fun. It has to be clean fun.
Yeah, but there's a second factor, I think, that is less appreciated and that I think is actually more important. And that's the glassy-eyed stare. That is, Johnny's playing the video game, and I'm not sure what the current terminology is. Back in the 80s, we said getting into the groove.
Yeah, he's in the zone.
In the zone, yes. That's yes. And the glassy-eyed stare is very frightening to the parents, and the parents don't quite know why, but they look at them and say, "This is wrong." The real reason why it scares people is because the state of consciousness that is attained when you're in the zone is basically analogous or even closer to that, maybe similar to the state of mind achieved by certain mind-altering drugs.
Right.
We use a lot of these drugs as a way of shutting down consciousness because our conscious awareness is too painful.
Right.
And so we go into the drugs and basically the neocortex just gets cut out of the loop.
Right.
Well, that's exactly what happens when you go into the zone. You bypass the cerebral processing. You're not consciously thinking about how to react.
Because you couldn't play well if you did that.
Right. It's dropped down to a lower level of processing, almost subconscious. And so basically you drop into the glassy-eyed stare, where there's enormous amounts of mental activity going on, none of it conscious.
But there's something, these are all based on these reflex video games. That's not really present in a turn-based strategy game, right?
Right. But the ones that scare parents are the ones where the kid drops into the glassy-eyed stare.
Which is what was present in all those people's early encounters with video games in the arcades. They were 100% games like that.
Game designers are acutely aware of this, and they're very defensive about it, and that's why they love to wrap themselves in the robes of art.
Right.
Always talk about art and games is nothing more than the attempt of game designers who feel guilty about their sordid games, trying to rationalize them as art. Screw all that.
Well, so the first thing you brought up, though, that the American puritanical values don't value just plain old fun.
Yeah.
Was almost, that's more of a critique of the values than it is a critique of video games.
Yes.
It's sort of like, well, we just aren't really ready for that yet, and play is important, but we're not ready to embrace it. But yet, what you were trying to do with your game designs and what I'm trying to do with my game designs is sort of still rise above just plain old fun. And that was you said, a reviewer of Balance of the Planet said it just wasn't fun. You know, and isn't that, why does my game have to be fun,
Yeah.
And so we are trying to get beyond fun a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Or me.
You and I are. But
well, I'm not saying the industry is. I mean, there's on the mainstream, like this new generation of consoles, there are these games where you seriously sit there. It's a 12-hour game, but 6 hours are completely non-interactive. These high-polished, three-dimensional, computer-generated movies. They're not on a CD-ROM. They're not pre-rendered. They're being rendered in the game engine. But you can't. One of them is 40 minutes long. You set in the middle of the game, you've been playing along, and then the character gets to a certain point, and it triggers this thing to happen. And you can just set your controller on the couch for 40 minutes and watch your character, who you've been controlling, get out from your control for 40 minutes and go do all these special fancy moves and action sequences and talk to other characters and argue with them and so on. And then eventually the control is returned to you, right? It's the cutscene.
Eye contact.
Well, I would strongly urge you never to undertake a project, a 17-year project, where you commit your whole life to it.
So do you, in retrospect, do you regret embarking on this?
I don't know. If it fails, I will definitely regret it.
I mean, I'm dreaming small. I'm picking the low-hanging fruit here, Chris. I work on something for a month or two. Maybe it fails, maybe it succeeds, but
Yeah.
most of the things I embark on, I'm pretty sure, hey, I can see how that's probably going to work.
Well, see, one thing
But some things need a full 17 years.
One thing you have done that is that gives you a lot more freedom is that you are not so wedded to materialistic stuff.
Right.
You have, low burn rate.
Well, I'll tell you what, Chris. I'm sort of fishing around for something to work on right now, and there's some other projects that may be coming down the line and so on. But if I get like a few weeks where I really feel at sea for something to work on, I'll try and make a story world.
Actually, I would advise against that.
Really?
You're exploring a very interesting angle, and I think you should follow your nose a bit further. I don't think you should, follow my work. I do think it might be useful for you to look over some of the concepts, learn a little bit about my technology, just to, maybe steal a few good ideas from it. But,
well, no, I guess I just thought, maybe there's... Look, I'm a programmer, right? And I'm a pretty good programmer. And I'm not talking about helping you with the programming, but what I'm saying is there's a lot of people who are probably trying to make story worlds who are struggling with it, but they might not be programmers themselves. They're coming at it from they're maybe fiction writers, or maybe they've written a little interactive fiction or something.
Yeah.
But I don't really have trouble really grappling with really complicated systems and so on. I mean, it seems like something I might be able to tackle, and maybe I could do something interesting with it. Maybe I could provide you with a story world that, that I'd be proud of as a creator, that would do some sort of push the boundaries of the medium, of the mediums of interactive storytelling potentially, but also of, the medium of games or whatever I created. It might kind of be something that some people could sort of see as a game, maybe, and maybe I'd do something cool with it. Maybe I'd make that television set and that you never thought anyone would make, and it'd be an interesting component,
Yeah.
In my story world, and it would make you think about things in a new way. And
Well, see, the thing that you have a
and maybe
very
I'd waste my time. Is that what you're saying, that I should spend my time elsewhere?
You have a very interesting and very different style of thinking about these problems than I do. And so I think you should follow that style. Now, I understand the idea that you've sort of run out of gas on this run.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you should stop. Maybe what I would suggest is first back up a little, spend some time learning about metaphor in the larger sense. I feel very strongly a good game designer has to know everything.
Right.
The most important thing to remember is do not be prescriptive, be descriptive. So. game design of which I am most proud, Trust and Betrayal, was a just
Yeah, we haven't
wild
talked about that.
fling in a completely different direction.
Now, that was on the Macintosh as well, right?
Yes, yes. And
And
actually,
I have played it. I have played it, a little bit of it.
Oh.
So this is the game where, and this is actually kind of funny because it kind of connects back to Between in a little bit, where you go at night into this dream state,
yeah, yeah,
and you're dealing with these essentially psychic animals
yes,
that you're having dream battles with.
yes, yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess after this, I do need to go back and boot up the old Macintosh and get some of these things running again to really take a closer look at them.
I don't know. I don't think they're that important.
Well, I don't know. I guess. Yeah. What do you mean they're not that important?
Ancient history.
Well, see, that's the funny thing, though, is like, again, we come back to the idea that in our medium, ancient history becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, they.
Which you said we're writing with sand. Your friend said that, and it doesn't seem like that should be the case. Like I went back and tried to play Mule. It was before my time, essentially.
I consider Mule to be the finest computer game design in history. Not that it's as good a game now as some of the games now, but because...
Before its place in history, also.
Yeah, for its place in history, it was absolutely a sensational design for a lot of reasons.
Well, as you play more and more, and as the resources get tighter and tighter, you sort of start to come to realize that if you stamp them into the ground completely,
yeah,
you actually depend on each other for survival on this planet.
Yeah.
And if you actually play the complete cutthroat capitalist, you're going to end up kind of hurting all of you and hurting yourself in the end, because you can't get the resource that they have or whatever. And so that hidden in the mechanics is this sort of message about how we need to temper our pure capitalism and so on. But it only comes out of the mechanics.
Yeah.
That era, wow. Looking back and reading about it and hearing about, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, you and other folks that you were very closely associated with, game designers, probably played a lot of Mule. No?
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
I just can't even imagine sitting down at a real computer with 4 real joysticks and looking at that, that Electronic Arts, out of all the companies, their ad from back in the day when they were announcing sort of their new company. Can a computer make you cry?
Dans un instant, où en sont les